Berger, I should say. And he's come all the way up to Glasgow this morning, and he's going all the way back to London this afternoon. So many of the speakers will be at the Q&A later on. Daniel will not be there because he's going back home. So I've asked him to give us a story, which he's going to do, and then we'll have a little bit of time at the end of his speech for you to ask questions, because he won't be here this afternoon. Now, we're hoping to stop for lunch just after about 12:20, 12:25. So, Daniel, you've got quite a bit of time, and if you want to stop a little bit early, that's absolutely fine. Thank you, Daniel.
Well, good morning. It's just about morning. And thank you for giving me the platform to come and speak and address you today. And Vicky, Sami, really kolakavod, congratulations. If we're talking about anniversaries, which we are, 10 years of this is really amazing. And I think MDAUK has been proud to play a part of that journey with you all the way through it. And it's amazing what you're doing. And hearing the stories from the speakers today, really, congratulations. You should both be immensely proud for everything that you're doing. So I'm Daniel Berger, and I'm the Chief Executive of Magen David Adom UK. And it's a really exciting organisation, and I'll tell you a little more in a moment. But we're on anniversaries, and we're on key dates. And I was just looking at our stall outside, which Jean Brannigan so beautifully set up with her volunteers and her friends. So if you haven't seen it, go and have a look at it. And what I love on that stall is a black and white photo. And it's a black and white photo, I believe, of an ambulance being dedicated in 1982 outside Glasgow Town Hall. This is when the Fords were built here before they were sent out to Israel. So anniversaries, key dates, goes back a very long way with Magen David Adom, and I'm absolutely thrilled that Glasgow has played such an intrinsic part of that journey for so long. So you should all be immensely proud of the support. And Magen David Adom UK is 76 years old. We were established in 1949, so just actually less than a year after the establishment of the State of Israel. And that's really significant because that means there has been love from the community for supporting Israel's National Medical Emergency Service for nearly the entirety of the State of Israel. And Magen David Adom in Israel, and I must confess my colleague on the slide deck actually got the first slide wrong, we are 95 years old, way pre the State of Israel. So when Sami was talking about British Mandate Palestine, that is when Magen David Adom was established. So a couple of photos as we're looking back in the history books, and we recently were going through our archives to celebrate our 75th anniversary dinner last year. And the first photo that came up is a very familiar face. This is Earl Mountbatten. So this is MDA and ultimately Israel's connection with a member of the royal family, and this photo was taken at the Israeli embassy in Kensington. So here he is dedicating what became known as the Winston Churchill Fleet of Ambulances. So there is a royal connection, and we're really thrilled that we have this photo. But then a really interesting story. I'm going through the photo archives, and on the next page, this photo appeared. And I'm looking at this photo, and you can see it's an older couple dedicating an ambulance. And the guy looks remarkably familiar. And God's honest truth, this story. I'm staring at the photo, and I'm zooming in, I'm looking at him, I'm thinking, he looks like my grandfather, my late grandfather. And so I take my phone and I zoom in on the plaque. And I don't know if you can see that there, but this was dedicated by Henry Berger. I'd never heard this name in my life. In Leeds, right, in memory of Gerald, his son who was killed in a car accident. So I go home and I ask my dad, ever heard of Henry Berger? He said, yeah, he's your great uncle. So, sorry, I've never heard of him. But it just shows that history and anniversaries and key dates, and suddenly there not only Earl Mountbatten, but jumping out at the stage from that book is Henry Berger with his wife Celia. People I'd never heard of because I have a very dysfunctional family that never spoke to each other. So it just shows the history books really do. And I said to people at our dinner when I presented and told people this story, history has this really unique way of allowing you to write what you want. And so today you're hearing from amazing speakers and me. And from those speakers, I would say to you, think about today, think about what you're hearing and everything you're hearing about the state of Israel through the day and see what will that tell you? What will it allow you to write in history? What will your history now write when it comes to advocating and supporting the state of Israel? And when we talk about Magen David Adom, I'm going to give you the elevator story of who we are because I hope a lot of you know us. Some of you here have been out on visits with us and so should know us. But it splits into three really core key components. Blood services. MDA is responsible for the blood supplies of Israel. And that itself is remarkable because a lot of people don't know this. And in the top there you'll see the Marcus National Blood Services Centre in Ramla. Now Sami was here with us when we opened it formally with President Herzog 2 years ago, just after Yom Ha'atzmaut. But interestingly, it took a long time for this building to come fully online and actually was scheduled to open and did open on the 9th of October 2023. They were amazed they were able to deliver it. But this building is mainly underground and can withstand a direct hit from a ballistic missile. So never was it more needed than then. $125 million to build this. It took 15 years in the dreaming and planning and 5 years in the construction. And these are just some of the images you can see of the blood processing. And Israel, by the way, sends blood all over the world. The DNA and the makeup of the country means there are some incredibly rare blood types. There are people living in Israel where they are quite literally the only person in the world known with that blood type, and their blood is cryogenically frozen. And that blood has been sent to enemy states before, states with no diplomatic relations with Israel. Because blood and saving lives, it trumps politics. And that is the beauty of Magen David Adom. Next. We are, and probably what we're best known for, is being the National Medical Emergency Service. So the ambulances, the motorbikes, the first responder cars, the first responders are mainly operated by Magen David Adom. In 1950, the Knesset mandated MDA, or MADA it is known in Israel, to be the National Emergency Medical Service of Israel. And it has done that proudly ever since. Its workforce is mainly volunteers. Over 90% of the people saving lives on a daily basis are voluntary, and they do it from 15. Youth volunteers up and down the country, quasi Boy Scouts, Girl Guides, learning to save lives, right the way through to, I believe, currently the oldest volunteer is in his late 80s. It's an amazing organisation. And again, reflecting on some of the speakers we've heard earlier today, look at this photo. This photo is the first female Bedouin paramedic working with a religious Jew in Beersheba saving lives. So again, when you're looking at in your packs and you're talking about the apartheid state of Israel, there you go. I'll ask Sami to send around, there's a URL to this photo in a book we have on our website, and we'll make sure that we can get the URL distributed to you, because when you want to look at the story of Magen David Adom, and when you want to look at how beautiful Israel is as a nation, when it comes to saving lives and when it comes to transcending politics, this book encapsulates it in photos so beautifully. This is taken in Turkey in February 2 years ago. So this is us providing aid at the request of the Red Cross and the Turkish government to help with the search and rescue following the earthquake. And the reason I'm showing you this is not just because MDA operates on the international stage and does what it should do, but because a very topical point which I'm constantly debating, and I thought I might take a moment of your time to talk about, is MDA's inclusion in the Red Cross movement. In 2005, a gentleman called His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Al-Khadid, who's a member of the Jordan royal family and the president of the Jordan Red Crescent, at that time was chairman of the Standing Commission of the Red Cross, the governing body of the Red Cross movement, the most senior person there could be in the Red Cross. And Muhammad is a true friend of Israel, because what Muhammad did was make sure that the red crystal, the diamond, became a protected, recognised Red Cross emblem. And that meant, in the most simple form, MDA was allowed to join the Red Cross movement. Because until then, the Arab League refused to have Israel admit it themselves, and MDA refused to operate under the cross or the crescent. So a compromise was worked through, and the red crystal became the third protected emblem for any national society that doesn't wish to use the cross or the crystal. Now that was significant, because what this has meant is suddenly MDA formally is doing what it's done for 6 decades prior on the world stage, which is go and save lives and go wherever it is needed. But now, finally, Israel, thanks to the Arab neighbours, became recognised as a member of the Red Cross. So whenever it is operating now, as you're seeing there, they can use the Red Star of David, and they can help, and they can do what they do best, which is a remarkable feat. Now, the other thing that's interesting, and I'm just going to jump onto this with the Red Cross, is the International Red Cross, the ICRC, which we sometimes forget and get confused with the Federation, which governs all of the national societies, such as the British Red Cross, the Americans, MDA, etc. The ICRC is responsible for times of armed conflict and the custodians of the Geneva Convention and international humanitarian law. And I went to Geneva to meet the president, who's ex-UNRWA, by the way, to talk about the hostages and why they're not doing with the hostages and why they're not calling out for the release of the hostages. And I feel that they haven't done enough, but I also want to set the record straight because of our relationship. The ICRC today remains the only organisation that genuinely has remained totally neutral and impartial. I'm not talking about individuals who may tweet and comment, but as an organisation, unlike the UN, unlike UNRWA, anyone else, they have not come out and taken sides. They remain totally bipartisan. And we've done a lot of work with them behind the scenes. There's been a lot of conversations which are privileged, but what I can tell you is we help them with their communication. MDA UK is proud to be talking to the ICRC, both in their London and Geneva offices, and saying, you need to understand the mood of the Jewish community and the wider communities pro-Israel. You need to be able to address the fact that you're not calling out the hostages whilst not taking sides. And so we've helped them with media interviews, we've helped them actually try and address that. And I'm aware that the narrative and the optics of what we saw with these sham releases, with signing of certificates coming out of Gaza when the hostages was released, was a joke. But they are saying it. It's very simple. People say, well, how can you allow armed Hamas terrorists to do this? And I think the armed Hamas terrorists is the key to that sentence. So what I will say about the Red Cross is we and MDA in Israel have worked very closely with them to ensure, firstly, and of course above all else, the safety of the hostages and to ensure they are able to be released. And we have made sure that they have remained bipartisan. All humanitarian organisations tend to have left-wing people, and therefore by default they're going to take a more left-wing, pro-Palestinian approach. But I can tell you that the British Red Cross, who are significant partners with us, gave over £2 million to our emergency appeal to help MDA when it came to their emergency appeal. So people supporting the British Red Cross supported both sides. And that is remarkable in itself, that we now have this relationship where they do that. And I think it's really important that you know that, and it's so much more lobbying than just saying we're a proud partner of the Red Cross. So over the last 2 years, particularly since the 7th of October, it's been an honour and a privilege to be able to lead submissions to Israel. And these are just a few of the photos of the first couple of missions. And I think it's important. We just try to reflect and take the very best of the photos because we've had amazing meetings. We were there on the anniversary of the 7th of October. We met with President Michael Herzog. We have met, she's not there, but we've met the Charge d'Affaires, the acting US ambassador. We had a very open, frank conversation, particularly around the Abraham Accords, Saudi joining the Abraham Accords, what it means with the Trump administration now back in play. And what you'll see, there's two remarkable photos in the middle. The gentleman on the left is called Mike Marlowe. His son Jake was brutally murdered. He was a security guard, a British citizen, murdered, who'd made Aliyah at the Nova Festival. And I happened on a previous mission to bump into Mike on the plane with his wife, who was moaning about the lack of legroom on El Al. And suddenly I realised from his very loud voice that he actually was Jake's father. And so we struck up a friendship over our loathing of El Al's legroom and talked about what had happened and why he was in Israel for that time. He was actually planting trees there at the Nova Memorial. Mike has become a brand ambassador for MDA since and joined us on our mission. That photo is taken on the 8th of October 2024 at the Nova site. So actually a year to the day Jake was found dead because they knew he got out and they didn't find the body on the 7th. And that's an ambulance being dedicated in memory of Jake by Mike and his wife Lisa, who's in the driving seat, yes. That replaces literally the vehicle in the next photo. That is it. No, sorry, not next line. Can you go back? The photo next to... The photo next to the one with Mike is a Burns House ambulance at Tacoma, if any of you have been to the vehicle memorials. This ambulance was used in a kibbutz by terrorists. We know that what their MO was to take the ambulance and to try and get into the kibbutz posing as MDA medics and then murder as many people as possible. Thank God, the ambulance is an old ambulance and wouldn't start. And when it couldn't start, they burnt it. No one was hurt in the ambulance, but that ambulance is now stood next to a Hamas terrorist vehicle as a timely reminder to everything that was utterly brutal and disgusting on that day. Part of what we've done as well is meet on these missions the most remarkable people, and I'm going to be very honest with you, the person that broke me more than anyone was meeting Elia Cohen, who was relatively recently released from captivity. Ziv, his fiancée now, I'm delighted to say, has been over with us a couple of times. She was appearing in the We Will Dance Again BBC documentary, which was one we screened, one up here in Glasgow. And we had to put her on a plane home, she was broken. And seeing her and Ziv walk into the restaurant where we were having dinner with us was one of the most remarkable sights. And hearing about Elia's time in captivity, they're remarkable. The strength shown by the hostages is truly remarkable. And two other people I wanted to touch on. I know Sammy sent a video around of Amit Man, who was murdered in the dental clinic in Be'eri. And Gilad Erdan, when he was the Israeli ambassador to the UN, used her story. He demonstrated to the world the brutality of these Hamas monsters. They murdered an MDA medic in their uniform, in a protected emblem, a total breach of the Geneva Convention, and they put a bullet through her head. She had her medical gloves on, and she was treating patients up until her last breath. The video is awful to be able to hear that, but Ronit was the dispatcher on the other end of the radio to her, and she was her last voice. I've heard that last recording followed by the bullet, and it's just horrific. But it reminds us, and what Gilad and what Ronit has done in that film is reminded us of the brutality of 7/10. And I went to the reburial, which I'd never even knew was a thing, of a man called Avia Hetzrioni. He was married to a British woman. He was a guy that was murdered in his 70s in Be'eri, again saving lives, wearing his MDA uniform as a volunteer. And he couldn't be buried in Be'eri along with his twin grandchildren until such time as it was safe. So I accompanied the family, who I know, and I went over to the reburial, and it was utterly gut-wrenching to see this brutality and to see someone like that who was only saving lives. So this is Magen David Adom. This is what we do. We save lives no matter what. And by the way, we save terrorists' lives, because these are medical professionals, and any medical people in the room will know you take a Hippocratic oath to save lives, come what may, no matter whose, no matter when, no matter where. And that is what the organisation does. So before I show and tell you my final story and open up the floor, I wanted to ask two things of you, really. Of course, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say to you, please support the organisation. You've all got pledge cards in your pack. We can only do what we do thanks to the support and the philanthropy of the diaspora. 30% of MDA's budget is made up by financial support, and the amount doesn't matter. Right? Anything that can be given to directly save lives in Israel, as many of you know our organisation, really does make a difference. And the impact, because it's a highly tangible organisation, it's bandages to ambulances to the underground blood centre. You make a difference no matter what. But secondly, and actually, ironically, I would say more important, and as a fundraiser, probably not what I should be saying, but if you do one thing today from this conference, I would say to you, please, all of the speakers you're hearing from are telling you how amazing Israel is and what it's dispelling the myths about apartheid states and whatever else you're hearing out there from the antis and the apathetic. You're never going to convince the antis and those nut jobs, they're too far gone. But speak to the apathetic, your colleagues at work who may not know about Israel but don't hate us, and advocate, but do it through the lens of Magen David Adom, because it's a life-saving organisation, and it's the organisation that can tell everything about the state of Israel. It saves lives no matter what. And it's very, very hard to counter life-saving. Now, Israel may not get it right all the time, and we know there are plenty of problems over there, but MDA dispels a lot of those broigas, a lot of those issues. So I would say to you, please advocate through the lens of MDA. So this slide that's on now, I just wanted to tell you a story, and I thought this one particularly poignant given I'm up in Scotland, and this can be very controversial to a lot of you. This is Netta's story. So M&H Distillery in Scotland, who won World's Best Single Malt, beat you lot with the best single malt in the world. We partnered with them. It's a bittersweet story, and Stanley in the front row will attest to it being a good whiskey, and he's a local. Netta Epstein was brutally murdered on the 7th of October. This, in the middle and on the left, is his house, and Ayelet is his mother. Netta was a brewer for a hobby. He enjoyed brewing, and he invented something called Israeli bitter ale. And Netta's dream was to have one of his empty casks have whiskey aged in it, because he also loved whiskey. And he'd approached M&H a few years ago and said, could you age a whiskey in my car? And they said yes. And of course, tragedy happened, and on the 7th of October, Netta threw himself on top of his fiancée, Irina, to save her life when the grenades were coming in. Irina's alive. Netta did the ultimate sacrifice, and you remember we say, he who saves one life, it's as if he saves the entire world. Well, Netta was a hero that day, and we met Ayelet outside his house, and we had partnered with M&H, and we bottled for MDA UK with the family's blessing Netta's story. So there in the middle is Netta's story, with our group drinking a l'chaim with Ayelet to the story. So I thought, given where I am, this bittersweet story is something very appropriate to end on. And again, I just wanted to thank and pay tribute to all of you, all the speakers, Vicky, Sammy. It's always a privilege to be here with you. And I promise you, London really isn't that far. You make it sound like I've schlepped halfway around the world to be here. But I would be delighted to take some questions, and if not, I'm sure we'll have lunch. So thank you. Thank you for the platform.
While everybody's thinking of what question they're going to ask you, Daniel, and I think there's a roving mic somewhere if we can use it. But you mentioned just briefly when you spoke that MDA looks after everybody that lives in Israel. So it's not just the Jewish people in Israel that MDA looks after. It looks after the Muslims and the Christians. And I think there was a story of MDA helping either a terrorist or the family of a terrorist, and they had to get blood for him. I was wondering if you can tell us that story.
Yeah, it's a great story, thank you. So first I'm going to correct, it's not just MDA looks after everyone. MDA is served by everyone, as you saw in that photo, for Israeli society. It's a total cross-representation. Yes, there was an injured terrorist taken to hospital to be treated to stand trial, and they realised he had an incredibly rare blood type, one that MDA didn't have in its inventory and didn't have in the freezers either. But they discovered that living in the West Bank, the family were a match. So they coordinated with the Palestinian Red Crescent, and literally they went to the border. The Palestinian Red Crescent brought the family, they took the blood and took it to, I think it was Hadassah, to be able to save the terrorist's life, because that's what they do.
Short and sweet. Anybody with a question for Daniel? Hands up, please. We've got a few minutes at the very back there. You have to stand up so we can hear you.
Where can we get a bottle of that whiskey?
Look at that, my endorsement of Warriors. But drop us a line. If you email, info at, find me afterwards, I'll give you the details. But anybody who wants one, go onto our website or info at mdauk.org and be in touch and we can sort that.
So let me ask, you mentioned the blood centre. Can you tell us a little bit more about how special the building is, what it's been built to do, what it's been built to withstand, where it's placed, where it's based, which is quite important as well? That could be quite interesting.
I can tell you've been there, Sammy. I can tell you've been there. Thank you.
I know.
No, I can tell by the question. Thank you for prompting. It's built in Ramla, so it was given land in Ramla, which is central. It's near the airport. It sits on two highway intersections and a train line, and is next door to the Homefront Command, which has a helipad. So it's a really strategically important location. 3/4 of the 500,000 square feet, or 45,000 square meters, is underground. At its deepest point, 17 meters or 50 feet. As I say, it cost $125 million to build, of which the good old Israeli government contributed absolutely nothing, which is remarkable in itself. It is now the world's most protected blood center, and it was built for 3 reasons. Terror, clearly. They needed something protected. The current blood center in Sheba, in the hospital complex there, was above ground, and with sirens going off, they would have to decommission machines, take them downstairs, recalibrate them, get it all established, and work in something 1/4 of the size that was not fit for purpose. So they built this, and they were able, as a result, to constantly put the building underground. And the architecture design is amazing. They've built a light well through the middle of it. So even 17 meters underground, it has natural light coming into the building. The core of the building is built to Ministry of Defense regulations and can take that Iranian ballistic missile. I don't know the ins and outs. It's way beyond my military pay grade to know what's going on from security services there. But actually, what the Israelis feared more, and we saw it with Turkey, Israel sits on 2 geographic fault lines, and they are long overdue an earthquake. Typically, they've seen a terrible earthquake every 100 years approximately, and Israel really, they are fearing that more than they were fearing terror when they built the building. So it can absolutely withstand that. And then thirdly, it's just population growth. A Western developed country should be able to have 5% of its blood of the population processed annually, and the previous blood centre couldn't do that. So now, with the future growth projections in the population from both the Israeli Arab and the Haredi, and probably people making Aliyah, it will be able to future-proof for at least 40 or 50 years that.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking for hands. Oh, good. Who's got one? Ruth.
It's not a question, it's a point of information that one of the other things that the blood bank has is a baby milk bank. Yeah. And not only do they have regular baby milk, but they also have for premature babies, and I think that's just a wonderful addition. Yeah.
Thank you for pointing. And with the milk bank, thank you for that. I completely forgot about that. It's really important. And during 7/10 in the war, with all the women called up into Miluim, into reserve duty, they were providing milk for the babies at home while the mothers couldn't breastfeed because they were on active duty.
Okay.
Question over
Yeah, Gila.
I read once that there is a service that is motorbikes, because sometimes there is a taxi
Yeah.
so the motorbikes can go and reach first.
So Magen David Adom has a fleet of motorbikes. It's not the only service in Israel. There are other organisations with first responders as well. But the Ministry of Health has mandated every single first responder, no matter which organisation, to be on the MDA 101 dispatch number. So it is possible that a motorbike which can whiz through the city comes out, but you may call MDA but not actually be treated by an MDA first responder. Correct. It's I think you're referring to United Hatzalah, which is it's in Orange, right? They're very good. They're first responders, but typically a lot of them are now attached to MDA's call centre. And the other thing is they have a very small number of ambulances. So if they get to the scene and they need an ambulance, they're still going to call Magen David Adom anyhow. So the organisations all work really well together, and this is the technology. And I should have said, by the way, Wes Streeting was relatively recently out in Israel visiting our facilities, and we've got him on video, you can see it on our social media channels, saying MDA and Israel's technology is so advanced, it's so far ahead of the NHS, here is technology we need to be importing into government. So here you have the Health Secretary saying we need Israeli technology in the NHS. Yeah, well, we only have to look at ambulance response times to know that.
So a few years ago at a previous conference, we had an MDA speaker, and his name was Uri Goldberg, I think, or Goldberger, can't remember.
Goldberg.
And his presentation was all about MDA technology. And this was like 5, 6, 7 years ago, I can't remember. And he talked about the fact that if anybody phones MDA, the system pinpoints where that phone call is coming from, so that you don't have to spend time on the phone asking the person, where are you? And that information is passed directly to the ambulance, and the ambulance driver knows exactly where to go. Now, there's probably other things like that you might be able to mention. If you can, I don't know.
Sure. So with the advancement of AI, Magen David Adom is now using a huge amount of AI in its dispatch centre technology in 2 real areas. Firstly, it looks at peaks in traffic flow and also times of day and typical call-outs over the previous period to ensure that ambulances are in the right places. So if it knows at peak rush hour there's more chance of an accident on the Ayalon, or there's a junction where there's been a lot of accidents in the past, it will dispatch an ambulance to that area to hang around at certain times to know. The other thing that's really interesting is the Home Front Command Iron Dome system will immediately trigger the trajectory of where they think, if the missile doesn't get intercepted, where it will land, or we're also seeing injuries from the shrapnel fallout from the Iron Dome itself. So literally within the same seconds as the Iron Dome recognising a rocket's on its way, ambulances by AI are dispatched to where the trajectory is going to land. So it's absolutely remarkable. The ambulance arrives sometimes before the rocket.
So I think this is the kind of stuff that Wes Streeting may have been looking at when he was over there. And I think the NHS is more than 5 or 6 or 7 years behind, which is a shame. So if we can pick up in this country some of that technology, it's for everybody's benefit in this country as well. I'm looking to see, because Daniel's stopped exactly at the right time without knowing it.
Everyone's hungry.
So anybody else with a question, or can we just thank? Oh yes, okay. Could you stand up, Stefan, so we can hear you?
Is your organisation able to do anything to help the many tens of thousands of people who are injured and maimed within Gaza? And if it could do anything, would it do anything?
It's a great question, and yes, the short answer is yes. So It works very closely with the Palestinian Red Crescent. I mean, let's be very open and honest here. 710 shut the borders on both sides. But we, I can tell you, historically, in peace times, MDA and the Palestinian Red Crescent work closely together to bring injured Palestinians into Israel for treatment. Save a Child's Heart, some of you may know, we constantly were bringing Palestinian children from Gaza particularly into Israel for treatment. It's much harder now, right? And it's not through not wanting to and lack of willing to be able to help the civilians in Gaza, but it's realistically, we can't get medicines in. I had this conversation, Sammy knows this story, Philippa Whitford, she was MSP?
An SNP MP.
Right, so Philippa, Sammy connected me with, and she is a medical professional. She was the most senior medical professional in Westminster when she was there. And she used to write articles saying that there's an inequality between the medical healthcare services of Israel and Gaza. And no one's going to disagree with that. It's absolutely true that there is far more basic and not very good, let's be honest, medical provisions in Gaza. And I reached out to her and I talked about how we, through our community, had sent hundreds of thousands of pounds of medical aid that had been donated of medicines for cancer patients into Gaza. And we had sent particularly medicines for children, cancer patients, and doctors and expertise. And then the Hamas Ministry of Health decided one day, no more. So they would turn around and say Israel's not allowing the aid in, but we had aid sitting at the border trying to get in. And I spoke to Philippa about this, and we had a really interesting long lunch in Westminster, and then recently up here in Glasgow I met her and her husband for lunch, and we talked and we agreed that it's an absolute tragedy that there are so many civilians being maimed and killed, but we can't get the aid in. And I said to her, help us. I know she'd stood down at this point, but I said MDA will do what it can to help. It's part of the Red Cross. And coming back to what I said earlier, MDA joined the Red Cross movement on the same day and signed a joint MOU with the Palestinian Red Crescent. And to date, the Palestinian Red Crescent remains the only national society without being a sovereign nation. And last year, at the annual Federation of the Red Cross conference, the Palestinians and the Israelis, side by side, signed another MOU, reaffirming their commitment to work together. So that's a long answer to your question, but in short, the sides have to be able to talk and collaborate, and that's really not feasible now.
Okay.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up? Do you think the Israeli government could do more to help by making more of an effort not to bomb hospitals within Gaza?
Look, I think we're getting into political territory that I can't comment on, and I don't. The beauty of my role is I sit above politics, and I would be breaching my Red Cross obligations if I commented in a political manner.
Kayed, you've got a question.
Moving forward, what are the biggest challenges you face?
The challenges for MDA in Israel. Well, certainly government funding. We constantly lobby the government to put more money in, but then at the moment we're seeing with pay cuts to teachers and everywhere else, and the Israeli government seeing they need to put more money into defence. It's hard. We were very fortunate for all the wrong reasons that we saw huge amounts of financial growth after 710, which we are now having to protect and do a lot more in Israel. So cost bases have gone up. To put a bulletproof ambulance in key strategic areas costs 4 times as much as a regular ambulance. So we are spending an absolute fortune protecting our crews. All of the ambulances have bulletproof helmets, bulletproof vests for the driver, for the medic, and most importantly for the patient. So a lot of it is going on protecting and ensuring that we can be there for the country. I think if West Streeting and others are serious and MDA can sell the intellectual property, then I think that is a great revenue generator for them, and that would be, so my challenge there would be to get Israel to understand how to sell their technology on the world stage, and if they can, it will make them much more self-sufficient. Probably talking myself out of a job, but it would be great to see that technology exported on the world stage.
There was another question at the back, please. I can't see who it is, but if you stand up.
Other than giving money, obviously, are there any other
So medical professionals definitely in Israel. We are working, MDA has training for doctors, for medics, for others, that if they want to go to Israel, do a very brief conversion course, and then go out on shifts and help. Yes, absolutely. And that's a great question. Thank you. We would love to welcome medical professionals in Israel helping. The other thing any of you can do, 3 years ago, the WHO lifted the ban on Brits being able to give blood. So, subject to your medical health, we can now give blood in Israel. So if you're there, go give blood, because they do genuinely need the blood. And it helps. Each unit saves 3 lives.
Okay. All of a sudden we've got lots of questions. Okay, that's great. Judy?
Just a quick one. Do the health insurance companies in Israel contribute to the cost of MDA?
Yes, they reimburse the ambulance fees, absolutely. So state insurance will reimburse to a degree. If you don't have top-up insurance, it's about 50% of that bill is covered. But anyone coming up on the bike, to your point earlier at the back, they're all free of charge. So a first responder who can't take you to hospital doesn't charge to come and help.
Gilad, just a quick one, Gilad, you can ask another question. Yeah.
Well, regarding the ambulances in Gaza, it has been proven that it have been transporting terrorists outside. What is the situation between the organizations? Because you said apparently they are equal, but they're not equal. One is supporting terrorists, and then there's us. So how it is dealt is how is there a situation? Who is limiting or observing the ambulances in the Arabs territories, because it's used for terrorism?
Well, yes, we know, and there's an ongoing situation and investigation in what happened with the Palestinian Red Crescent a couple of weeks ago. The ICRC work anywhere there's armed conflict, so they are in Gaza. The British Red Cross has a huge field hospital in Gaza at the moment, so this is providing medical aid. So to the gentleman's question at the back about aid from the Red Cross getting into Gaza, absolutely. The ICRC and the IFRC, the Federation, are supposed to monitor each national society and their behaviour. I can't comment on what's going on in Gaza with the Palestinian Red Crescent. All I know is from my times of working with them at times of peace, and I've witnessed back-to-back patient crossings into Israel and taken to hospital. We do know it happens. And there was a case a few years ago where MDA and the security services at the Eretz checkpoint was heavily criticised for stopping a Palestinian ambulance at the border and insisting on searching a pregnant woman who was coming to hospital because the pregnant baby was a load of Semtex strapped to her body. So we do know it happens, but we have to work on the basis of they are life-saving organisations with some bad people taking advantage.
If I include it in the same level as the UNRWA and it's completely corrupt, can you say the same of the services in the Arab places? It's as corrupt as the UNRWA, which is UNRWA, is United Nations. You don't, it's difficult to understand the corruption, the terrorism inside these organizations. How do you, can you see this, the Arab organization, in that sense, in the Gaza organization of ambulances and the Red Cross or Crescent?
I think
there is a normal dialogue, or it is wrong?
operational level, there's always normal dialogue. As I said earlier, 710 has made it really difficult. The bridges and the borders have been closed. It is very difficult. So we rely on the British Red Cross and the Federation to ensure that medical aid is there. We know there are some issues. It's not perfect at all, but we have to work and hope that the Palestinian Red Crescent, just like MDA and just like every other member of the Red Cross, is there to save lives, and their members work with the Hippocratic Oath.